verse 20. Deuteronomy 28, verse 20. The Lord shall send upon thee cursing and vexation and rebuke, and all that thou settest thy hand onto for to do. So anything that we put our hands onto, it shall be cursed, and it will become our destruction. For example, something we call hip hop, right? I got to boil it down to this present time. I need my younger generation to relate to this, right? Hip hop was something that was created by the so-called African American, and Puerto Ricans, right? We got our young brothers here, a picture of them back in the Bronx, right? It was about a lot of the lyrics in the music before, other people started making it more wicked. It was predominantly talking about revolution, right? The injustice that happens in the ghettos and the slums, the police brutality, right? You got groups like Run DMC, NWA, you already know, right? Even though they were still talking about some wicked stuff, the majority of them were trying to shed some light on the things that were happening in the inner cities. Fast forward to 2023, we got something called drill music. Now, and I'm not saying that we weren't talking about this in the past, but when you compare to then and now, this drill music is destroying the so-called blacks and Latinos. It's destroying us, man. Look at this picture, man. This man hugging up a gun with the money on his face. It's crazy. Here's a couple articles from snippets of some articles, right? It says that drill, the brutal rap that fuels gang murder. Drill music, a nihilistic genre filled with boasts of death and violence. Knife crime on the rise because of drill music. Drill, the demonic music linked to rise in youth murders. YouTube drill music is to blame for escalating gang violence, judge says. Police targeting drill music videos and controversial crackdown on social media that incites violence. Disturbing new form of British rap called drill is blamed from surge in gang killings. YouTube deletes multiple violent drill music videos at the request of UK police. So this is something that's happening in the UK right now, but it's also happening all around the world. New York, Florida, California, right? They're getting our young brothers is getting and sisters are getting more prideful with it, right? And speaking about murders that they're doing on their music, right? And they're talking crap to each other, one another on these songs, and it creates violence, gang violence. The New York Times article said Jermaine Gopal, 15, was killed in an attack that a judge in London said was foreshadowed by violent rap lyrics. Understand that, my brothers and sisters. This is how we're cursed. We set our hands upon something called hip hop rap, and now look the condition that it's in now. Right? We know some of these artists that just passed away a couple months ago, a couple years ago. Pop Smoke, Offset, Young Dolph, P&B Rock. And I'm not saying that the 90s rap, 2000s rap wasn't wicked. I'm just telling you how we put our hands on something that was decent in the beginning, and throughout the years, throughout the decades, it just got worse and worse, and it's just destroying us. It's just destroying us. That's the curses, right? Over there in New York, specifically in the Bronx, they got a whole operation called Drilly. Operation Drilly to take down our northern tribes, our so-called Black and Latinos, man. This is, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 16, 4. This is 20 people, right? that was arrested by information they leaked out on their music, right? All these killings happening in the Bronx, in Brooklyn, right? They call it Operation Drilly Takedown. This is how we're cursed. This is how everything that we set our hand to, right? We will receive cursing, vexation, and rebuke, right? And we will be destroyed and we will perish quickly, right? Because of our wickedness. All right, let's move on. Verse 21. The Lord shall make the pestilence cleave unto thee until he have consumed thee from off the land, whether thou goest to possess it, right? We already know about one infamous one that cleaved on us just a couple of years ago, and guess what? It's making its round again. It's coming back, right? You already know the vid, what they call the vid 19, right? That's a plague, right? That's a curse. Not only that, something that the so-called Black, Latino, Native Americans has been dealing for decades: high blood pressure, diabetes, stroke, right? We're the ones that are constantly dying from these sicknesses and diseases in a higher level. Yes, all the other nations, it happens to them as well because of this wicked kingdom that we live in. But when you look at the statistics, we are higher on the statistics. We're dying on a larger scale because of these diseases, right? And it's because of our disobedience and not keeping the law, statutes, and commandments. What does article say here? Cardiovascular disease is primed to kill more older adults, especially Blacks and Hispanics, right? Cardiovascular disease, the number one cause of death among people 65 and older, is posed to become more prevalent in the years ahead, disproportionately affecting Black and Hispanic communities and exacting an enormous toll on the health and quality of life of older Americans. You see that? This is us suffering the curses. It's right here in the Bible. Deuteronomy 28, verse 21. The Most High shall make the pestilence cleave unto thee until he have consumed thee from off the land where thou goest to possess it. The Lord shall smite thee with consumption and with a fever and with an inflammation and with an extreme burning. Right? Salaki, I didn't realize I wasn't. Let me get the scriptures while we're on here. Right? Verse 21. The Lord shall make the pestilence cleave unto thee until he have consumed thee from off the land where thou goest to possess it. The Lord shall smite thee with a consumption and with a fever and with inflammation and with an extreme burning and with the sword and with blasting and with mildew. And they shall pursue thee until thou perish. This is part of the curses, my brothers and sisters. This is part of the curses. We need to understand that. We need to understand that. All right. Here's another interesting fact. Black, Hispanic, and indigenous individuals in the U.S. face the highest burden of asthma. Asthma. These disparities are caused by complex factors, including systemic and structural racism. This is compared to white Americans. Black Americans are nearly 1.5 times more likely to have asthma. Puerto Rican Americans are nearly 2 times more likely to have asthma, right? Black Americans are 5 times more likely to visit the emergency department due to asthma. Black Americans are 3 times more likely to die from asthma. When sex is factored in, Black women have the highest rates of death due to asthma. Right? Why is this happening to us? Because the lack of resources, the lack of access we have to healthcare, right? Our parents think, you don't need no asthma pump, right? It'll go away when you get older, right? Those are the things that are being told to us. Those are the things that are being told to us. Salakia, I got this. Let me do this again. What just happened? Salakia family, I'm a little rusty today. I'll get back on it. Right? That pestilence that cleave onto us and it's gone and it's starting to cleave onto us again. The COVID-19, right? When this was happening, death rates among older Hispanic, American Indian, and Black adults are nearly double the rate among older white adults. The statistics show, man, that the curses cleave on us, that these diseases cleave on us more because of our disobedience. Right? Because of our disobedience, man. And that plays a part with the lack of financial support. We're constantly underpaid, so we don't have the means to get these resources to keep us healthy. Right? Here's another statistic. Many Americans are facing substantial economic hardship during the pandemic. Right? This is during the pandemic as well. Latino and Black people experience these hardships at significantly higher rates than white people. See that? We the ones that had to borrow more money. We was taking our loans, them PP loans. Right? We didn't even have any businesses. The so-called white man was also taking out PP loans as well. Right? But he was using them into these businesses that they already had. And whatever scheme they were doing, they weren't getting caught up by it. But the so-called Black and Latinos, what they was doing, they was going around, buying Lamborghinis, buying clothing, this and that. That's the curses, man. Because anything we set our hand to shall not prosper. I'll read it again. Deuteronomy 28, verse 23. And thy heaven that is over thy head shall be brass, and the earth that is under thee shall be iron. Meaning what? Everything that you're between, what they say, a rock and a hard place. That's so-called Black Latinos. That's a saying that we have, right? We're between a rock and a hard place. Meaning what? That we're just constantly surrounded by heavy burdens, right? Trying to figure out how to live on a weekly basis. We live in check by check. We don't know what the future beholds. We're in financial hardships, right? Relationship hardships, right? So the heaven being brass and the earth being iron is heaviness, right? So during the pandemic, there was an increase in rates of suicide on the Black and Latinos, but it's definitely not compared to the so-called white man, right? The so-called white man, this man commits suicide if he loses his job, if the stock market goes down, if they go into a recession. We have different problems, right? We have these problems. You have a sister here named Ashley Edwards, right? The article reads, more Black and Hispanic young people living with anxiety, stress, and depression and mental illness, right? Community violence, living in food deserts, mass incarceration, systemic racism. The mental health impacts of these play out on a daily basis in the lives of kids, specifically Black and Hispanics, right? And these are all curses, right? The food deserts, right? That was the curse of the curse shall be the fruit of thy land. Curse shall be thy basket in thy store, right? The violence, curse shall thou be when thou comest in, and curse shall thou be when thou goest out. right? When our children is surrounded by this on a daily basis, they're going to be feeling like a heavy burden is on them, right? Mental illness, depression, all that stuff is real when we're suffering the curses. The way we can get out that, we don't need to take pills. We don't need to go to therapy. We don't need to do those things. We just need to keep the commandments and come back to the Most High, right? And he will remove these things, this violence, these food deserts, these mass incarcerations, right? Let's move on. Verse 24, and the Lord shall make the rain of thy land powder and dust. From heaven shall it come down upon thee until thou be destroyed. Right? What do we need rain for? The Most High said he will bless us with the rain in our due season when we keep the commandments. So what does the rain do? The rain, it helps our earth, the soil, be plentiful and bless us with crops and fruits, right? We got our so-called Haitian brothers that are on the top 10 countries suffering from hunger. You know, the so-called Haitians are from the tribe of Levi, right? A number of people facing severe hunger is 4.7 million projected. Primary drivers of hunger: political unrest, gang violence, and extreme weather events, right? This is from the World Food Program published in March. This is what's happening now. This is the curses, right? Now we're falling under what happened to these other countries in Africa because of our disobedience. Understand that, Israel. Let's move on. Deuteronomy 28, verse 25. The Lord shall cause thee to be smitten before thy enemies. Thou shalt go out one way against them and flee 7 ways before them, and shall be removed into all the kingdoms of the earth. And thy carcass shall be meat unto all fowls of the air, and unto the beasts of the earth, and no man shall fray them away. I mean, you know, do I have to say anything? The numerous of massacres in the United States alone unto the so-called blacks and indigenous Native Americans and Seminole Indians. This history is out there. This history is in the books. We just got to look for it. It's part of the curses. I just read that out of the Bible. This is before we go into the land of Canaan. This already has been prophesied to happen to us. Has been destined to happen to us if we was disobedient. Right? We were smitten before our enemies. Right? This is a picture from the book Devastation of Indies. Right? And the people standing behind these people being chewed up by beasts, by dogs, were the Spaniards, right? Some of us already dead with our heads cut off, and the animals are just chewing on us. What is the curse? Deuteronomy 28, verse 25. The Lord shall cause thee to be smitten before thy enemies. Thou shalt go out one way against them and flee 7 ways before them, and shall be removed into all the kingdoms of the earth, right? And thy carcass, our dead bodies, shall be meat unto the fowls of the air and unto the beasts of the earth. And no man shall fray them away. A picture gives us 1,000 words. We trying to flee 7 ways from before them, you know, the so-called runaway slaves. We always was trying to find a way to leave the plantation and get out of there. And we always slipped up and get caught up. And now they send their dogs, their hound dogs, to come get us. This is fulfilling the curses. right? Our Native American, when they was fighting President Jackson, right? The Indian Removal Act, all that history fulfills the curses, right? This is us fleeing 7 ways before them, right? This is us being smitten before our enemies. These wars were one of the most what's the word I'm looking for? Bloodiest wars that the Americans ever had against the Native American Seminole Indians, right? We was wiping them out, right? But why we didn't succeed? Because of the Most High. Because of the Most High. We didn't succeed, and then we was moved into all the kingdoms of the earth. The Indian slave trade, right? We're being smitten before our enemies, right? Here's an article that happened in the past, right? This is a slave named Paul. The slave Paul had suffered so much in slavery that he chose to encounter the hardships and perils of a runaway. He exposed himself in gloomy forests to cold and starvation and finally hung himself that he might not again fall into the hands of his tormentor. Listen, man. That's how much rigor our so-called African-American brothers were suffering, right? He hanged himself, right? And look at the picture. What's that in the air? I'll read it again. Deuteronomy 28, verse 25. The Lord shall cause thee to be smitten before thy enemies. Thou shalt go out. No, Salakia, verse 26. Deuteronomy 28, verse 26. And thy carcass shall be meat unto all fowls of the air. This brother hanged himself so he doesn't fall in the hands of his tormentor again. That's part of the curses, my brothers and sisters. It's part of the curses. We would revolt. We will rise up and fight against our enemies, right? We will flee 7 ways before them, but then we get caught up again, right? You got the 60s, we constantly rising up and fighting, but we don't succeed. We only succeed for so long. Brothers like Nat Turner, right? Creating the revolution, right? But why didn't these men succeed? Why didn't it erase slavery, right? Because it wasn't meant to. The Most High, Yahweh, Yahweh Shai are the only ones that would save us and redeem us from this captivity, right? Scripture said, we shall be removed into all the kingdoms of the earth. You have the slave trade routes from the 1400s to the 1800s, right? It was removed to all these different countries, all these kingdoms of the earth. Who else that happened to? I'll wait. Let's move on. The Lord shall smite thee. One second. Let's go back to the scriptures. So we're in the book of Deuteronomy 28, verse 27. Lord will smite thee with the botch of Egypt, and the botch and with the emerods, and with the scab, and with the itch, whereof thou canst not be healed. The Most High will continue to smite us with sicknesses and diseases, things that we cannot heal from, right? Verse 28, the Lord shall smite thee with madness and blindness and astonishment of heart. And thou shalt grope at noonday as the blind gropeth in darkness. And thou shalt not prosper in thy ways. And thou shalt be only oppressed and spoiled evermore, and no man shall save thee. no man shall save us. Right? Slavery, the oppression we was experiencing, right? Same thing happened in the West Indies and the Caribbean, right? The British colonized the so-called Jamaicans and those that descend from the West Indies, that live in the West Indies, right? We were groping at noonday. I'll read the scripture again, verse 29. And thou shalt grope at noonday as the blind of groping in darkness. And thou shalt not prosper in thy ways. And thou shalt be only oppressed and spoiled evermore, and no man shall save thee. We would grope at noonday because we don't know what our life beholds. We don't know if we're gonna live at the end of the day, right? Because we constantly were seeing this. Our people being hanged and whipped and beaten in front of our children, being branded, right? We didn't know which way we were going to go. We didn't know what our life beholds, what our future beholds. Verse 30. Deuteronomy 28, verse 30. Thou shalt betroth a wife, and another man shall lie with her. Thou shalt build an house, and thou shalt not dwell therein. Thou shalt plant a vineyard, and shalt not gather the grapes thereof. Right? How did the so-called Black, Latino, Native American, Seminole Indians enjoy their wives when they were constantly in being oppressed and in captivity? How are you going to enjoy your wife being like this, in this condition? Right? We know what this movie is, right? 12 Years a Slave. This is the scriptures being fulfilled. Right? This was Solomon. I forgot his last name. But this man Solomon was a slave for 12 years, and then he was able to escape through the emancipation, right? But his wife was taken away, right? Our Native American woman was being stolen and sold to other nations for prostitution and sex slaves, right? Here's a picture depicting that, right? So-called Caucasian man taking the woman away from the man, the other man holding him back, trying to beat him, right? This happened in the 1600s, the 1800s, right? When they used to come and separate the families, take the husband and sell them to another family, right? They was taking these women and they was laying with them, a woman that was promised to us, right? Let's move on. Verse 31, thine ox shall be slain before thine eyes, and thou shalt not eat thereof. Thine donkey shall be violently taken away from before thy face, and shall not be restored to thee. Thy sheep shall be given unto thy enemies, and thou shalt have none to rescue them. Right? We will constantly, all our resources were being constantly taken away from us. Right? How does that happen today? You know, the cars that we can't even keep up the payments with, finally taken away by the tow trucks, right? If you miss a payment on your mortgage, or if you fail to pay your mortgage, your homes will be taken away, right? What happened in 2008? We signed these 30-year mortgages and we couldn't even afford them, right? Those were our resources being taken away right before our eyes. Right? Verse 32, thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people, and thine eyes shall look and fail with longing for them all the day long, and there shall be no might in thy hand. We already know that we've seen this happen in slavery, in the history of slavery. How's this happening now? How can we apply this curse to this present day? The DCF, right? We have many DCFs around the world, around the states, right? but the DCF take away your children. Right? They come up with these lies and say that we've been beating on our children to take away our children and give them to another family. Right? They take away our children, and what happens? It separates our families. That's a curse. It happened to our so-called northern Hispanic brothers too. More than 4,100 migrant children and families were packed on Tuesday into a Texas border facility designed for 250 people. And here they will separate us from our children. Right? They will separate us from our children, and they say they lose. I think there was an article that said that they lost thousands of children at these concentrated camps. Right? This is part of the curses. Right? You have ICE, Border Patrol, immigrant services, constantly deporting our people and taking the children and giving them to another family in foster care, adoption, right? And there's these other nations that adopt these children, and these other wicked, filthy, abominable Gomorrites and Sodomites, because they can't produce any children. They'll take your children and then turn them into a Sodomite and a Gomorrite. It's part of the curses. Let's read on. Deuteronomy 28, verse 33. The fruit of thy land and all thy labor shall a nation which thou knowest not eat up, and thou shalt be only oppressed and crushed away. So that thou shalt be mad for the sight of thine eyes, which thou shalt see. The Lord shall smite thee in the knees and in the legs with a sore botch that cannot be healed, from the sole of thy foot unto the top of thy head. Right? It's being repeated again, that the fruit of our land and the fruit of our labors, another nation will come and eat it up. What happened to the indigenous Native Americans? What happened to the so-called blacks? What's an example of that? Black Wall Street, right? They build up a neighborhood, a community to provide support for their brothers and sisters financially, and they come and they bomb the place, destroy Black Wall Street. Same thing they did to a neighborhood in Philadelphia, right? Another nation will come and eat up your place and oppress thee. They don't want us to be prosperous. They don't want us to succeed, but it's part of the curses. The Most High will smite us in the knees and in the legs. A lot of our old our elders have those bad legs and those bad knees, and they get swelled up from all that high cholesterol and abominations that we eat, from the sole of thy foot unto the top of our head. That sore botch, that itch that we cannot heal, skin diseases, right? Let's read on. Verse 36, the Lord shall bring thee and thy king, which thou shalt set over thee, unto a nation which neither thou nor thy fathers have known. And there shalt thou serve other gods, wood and stone. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound familiar? Right? We set up head chiefs in our tribes, in the Native Americans, indigenous in the North Americas, right? And these conquistadors, these Spaniards, came and wiped us out. The same king that we set over us to be leaders in our tribes and villages, right? Another nation will come and destroy them, right? A nation that we have not known, right? And this very same nation influenced us to worship other gods of wood and stone. Right? You have a picture here of these Spaniards coming in here with the wooden cross, and we start wearing the cross. Right? We start wearing that cross. We start praying to it. Right? It's specifically the Black and Latinos, man. We turn that wooden cross into a god. We over here praying to it. Christianity, Catholicism, right? These religions made us worship. We're breaking the commandments when we follow these religions, right? We worship wood and stone. This was never something that we worshiped when we was Hebrew Israelites. We never did things like this. But because of our disobedience, we've been cursed and we fell under the hands of our oppressors, and they influenced us to worship other gods of wood and stone. They go to wooden cross, the same cross that the Spaniards were holding when they came to the Americas. And then the statue of stone of what they call Jesus Christ, right? Our Latino brothers worship this picture of Guadalupe, of Mary, bow down to it and pray to it. Right? There's this big stone statue of Christ in Brazil. It's like 250 feet tall high. Look at all the people below it. They're over there worshiping this thing, man. This is something that we obtained from the other nations, from our oppressors, our slave masters, because of the curses. Now we worship Buddha, Shiva, when we smoking them big blunts, right? Verse 37, and thou shalt become an astonishment and a proverb, a byword among all nations, whether the Lord shall lead thee. How we fulfill this? They call us Black, Latinos, Mexicans, niggas, Jews. Well, not Jews. This was the KKK being racist to the Jewish people now, right? But they call us African Americans, Hispanic. We became a proverb and a byword, and we're astonishment unto these other nations because we constantly look ridiculous, right? Wearing blonde hair and blue nails, right? Wearing these feminist clothing, men wearing purses, right? When we do these wicked festivals, right? Like Carnival, we're an astonishment to these nations, right? They gave us bywords as Spanish and Mexicans, right? And these other nations, they were not dealing with us, right? This sign said, no niggas, Mexican, Puerto Ricans, or dogs. They compared us to dogs. We're no longer the head, we're the tail, literally, compared to dogs. Let's move on. Verse 38, thou shalt carry much seed out in the field and shalt gather but little in, for the locust shall consume it. Thou shalt plant vineyards and dress them, but shalt neither drink of the wine nor gather the grapes, for the worm shall eat them. Thou shalt have olive trees throughout all thy coast, but thou shalt not anoint thyself with the oil, for thine olive oil shall cast his fruit. Who's the his? Who's his fruit? The other people, the other nation. So what is it saying? You can read this book. There's over 1,000 inventions that were created by the so-called blacks. If you look at construction and in the building material field, the so-called Hispanics running that thing, man. We constantly building up this world, building up this country, and we don't enjoy any of that. We build up all these things and make a penny to the dollar. That's because of the curses. Verse 41, thou shalt beget sons and daughters, but thou shalt not enjoy them, for they shall go into captivity. Right? They shall go into captivity. Our children were sold in captivity, in slavery, right? Sold to the other families, right? This is part of the curses, right? They was out there picking cotton with our fellow brothers and sisters, man. It is part of the curses. Let's move on. Right? Verse 42, all thy trees and fruit of thy land shall the locust consume. The stranger that is within thee shall get up above thee very high, and thou shalt come down very low. He shall lend to thee, and thou shalt not lend to him. He shall be the head, and thou shalt be the tail. I mean, we just went over it. We went over it, Israel. We're the ones that have to borrow from all these banks. Anytime we have a financial hardship, we're the ones that have to borrow this money, and then we get taxed high interest rates. We are the tails, right? The stranger that is within thee shall get up above thee very high, and thou shalt come down very low. This is us fulfilling the curses, fulfilling the scriptures. Right? Let's move on. Moreover, all these curses shall come upon thee and shall pursue thee and overtake thee till thou be destroyed. Because thou hearkenest not unto the voice of thy power, the voice of thy Lord, thy God, to keep his commandments and his statutes. And they shall be upon thee for a sign and for a wonder upon thy seed forever. This is why we use the curses to determine who is the so-called blacks, Latino, Native Americans, Seminole Indians. The majority of this group of people are suffering these curses, and we use it as a sign and a wonder to explain and show our people that we are the chosen. We are the chosen people. Verse 47. Because thou servest not the Lord thy God with joyfulness and with gladness of heart and for the abundance of all things. Therefore shalt thou serve thy enemies, which the Most High shall send against thee in hunger and in thirst and in nakedness and in want of all things. And he shall put a yoke of iron upon thy neck until he have destroyed thee. Who was that neck upon? Who was that yoke of iron upon, my brothers and sisters? Right? Do I have to say anything? You guys get the picture, right? Who were enslaved in chains in the 1400s and the 1600s, right? Who did this happen to? Let's move on. The Lord shall bring a nation against thee from far, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flieth, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand, a nation of fierce countenance, which shall not regard the person of the old, nor show favor to the young. And he shall eat the fruit of thy cattle and the fruit of thy land until thou be destroyed, which also shall not leave thee either corn, wine, or oil, or the increase of thy kind, or flocks of thy sheep, until he have destroyed thee. And he shall besiege thee in all thy gates until thy high and fenced walls come down, wherein thou trustest through all thy land, throughout all thy land. And he shall besiege thee in all thy gates throughout all thy land, which the Most High Yahweh thy power hath given thee. Who's that nation? Who is swift as the eagle flieth? Right? The Babylonians, the Egyptians, the Edomites, the Romans, the Germans, the Americans, they all worship the eagle. Right? It's not a coincidence that they all have these eagles in their flags. Same thing with the Spaniards, the same thing with the French, and all these other nations. Right? You have the American eagle and the American dollar. Right? Who is this people? Who is that nation that will come from far, from the end of the earth? Who is that people? When they said they landed on the moon, right? There was a recording and it said the eagle has landed. Come on, man. This is like, if this ain't hitting, if this ain't connecting the dots to you, my brothers and sisters, y'all need to wake up and smell the coffee. Let's move on. Verse 53, and thou shalt eat the fruit of thy own body, the flesh of thy sons and of thy daughters, which the Most High Yahweh thy power have given thee in the siege, and in the straitness wherein thy enemies shall distress thee. Right? So that the man that is tender among you and very delicate, his eye shall be evil toward his brother, and toward the wife of his bosom, and toward the remnant of his children, which he shall leave. So that he will not give to any of them of the flesh of his children whom he shall eat, because he have nothing left him in the siege and in the straitness wherewith thy enemies shall distress thee in all thy gates. This is why we used to be delicate towards one another in the past. We used to say hi to one another. We could look at each other and greet each other. Can we do that now? Can we do that now, Israel? Right? Drug gang kills 20 in town hall massacre in southern Mexico. Can we do that now, Israel? You got the cartel that's destroying our people, and this society promotes the cartel. They want to be like Pablo Escobar. They want to be like what's his other guy's name? El Chapo. Right? They promote this in the music. These people are murderers. Right? We're no longer tender and delicate with each other. We always got a problem with each other. We fulfill the curses. Right? Gang violence on the high rise. It's been happening for years. We leave our children. And if we don't leave our children, we're not present there. Why? Because we're constantly working, trying to provide for our families, that we're not even taking care or trying to be an example and influence to our children. It's part of the curses. Let's move on. Verse 56, the tender and delicate woman among you, which would not venture to set the sole of her foot upon the ground for delicateness and tenderness, her eye shall be evil toward the husband of her bosom, and toward her son, and toward her daughter, and toward her young one that cometh out from between her feet, and toward her children which she shall bear. For she shall eat them for want of all things, secretly in the siege and straitness, wherewith thine enemy shall distress thee in thy gates. If thou wilt not observe to do all the words of this law that are written in this book, that thou mayest fear this glorious and fearful name, the Most High Yahweh thy power. So now, this very same woman who used to be tender and delicate as well, we wouldn't allow our princesses for their souls to touch the foot, to touch the ground. That's how delicate and precious our women were. Are they that now? How is she evil toward her husband now? Right? The separation amongst families with divorce, child support, right? Domestic violence, right? Not agreeing with one another, right? Evil toward her son and her daughter, right? Abortion, Planned Parenthood, the Plan B pill, right? Constantly putting men under child support for children that are not even theirs. The men suffering to pay for children that's not even theirs. They don't even, there's nothing wrong with helping the fatherless, right? But this is how our women are evil towards our brothers. Child support is something that's separating families, right? Yes, there's some deadbeat dads. Yes, there's some deadbeat men, right? But when the men are helping, what do these women do? They take the money and they buy their nails, their wigs, their purses, their clothing, go clubbing, popping bottles. It's supposed to help. It's supposed to help the children. This is how they're evil towards their husband and their family and their children. Let's move on. We're going to jump down to verse 68. Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 68. And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I speak unto thee. Thou shalt see it no more again. And there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. Listen, my so-called Black, Latino, Native American, Seminole Indians, those that descend from Negro and Indian descent. No other nation has been sold into slavery upon ships. And I'm talking about on the magnitude of the indigenous and our so-called Black brothers and sisters. From the 1400s to the 1800s, right? We got something called the transatlantic slave trade, right? This was prophesied in the Bible that we will be going into slavery upon ships, right? And we'll be sold unto our enemies, the Spaniards, the Europeans, the conquistadors, the Americans, right? The so-called Black, Latino, Native American, Seminole Indians that descend from Negro and Indian descent, this happened to you, to our forefathers. That's why it's important to look up your history, right? We were being sold unto our enemies. Here's an auction block a family being sold to slave owners. Negroes for sale, the sign says, right? This is the history they want to remove from the school system and teach you about the LGBTQ history. Are you freaking serious? They don't want you to know who you are. It's not a coincidence that those celebrities that mention anything about them being the Jews get canceled, start losing endorsements, start losing contracts. Ask yourself, why is that? But when you call yourself black, a nigger, a spook, a spick, a wetback, a Mexican, a Puerto Rican, a Dominican, they don't have no problem with that. But as soon as you say that you a real Jew and that those people are imposters, you get canceled. You get shut down. Your YouTube channels get shut down. Why is that? We was going into slavery upon ships. Egypt is a Greek word for Egyptos, which means bondage. Right? We were sold, we will go into bondage again. Because remember, we went into bondage into Egypt for 400 years when Moses and Aaron came and led us to the Red Sea. So they said it was going to happen again. And when did it happen? In the 1400s to the so-called Native American Seminole Indians, the indigenous tribes. In the 1600s to our so-called blacks, African Americans, right? We fell into slavery in the hands of our oppressors on ships, right? The conquistadors came to the land of no man where all the Native Americans dwelt. All these tribes dwelt in America before them, and they say they came here and they discovered America. We was here before them. Guess what? We fell into slavery under them, and we was sold into the other nations on ships, on the Pinta, La Niña, and Santa Maria. What other nation can say that they fell into hard bondage and were sold into slavery on ships from Portugal to Brazil to Jamaica to Africa to New York? What other nation can say that? There's no other nation, my brothers and sisters. There is no other nation. So with that being said, I want to say shalom to the nation of Israel, to all you so-called blacks, Latino, Native Americans, Seminole Indians. You need to come back to the word of God. You need to come back to your true identity, to your true nationality, because you are the real Jew. You are the true children of Israel, and we need to come back and repent. Shalom.